good morning, and good morning again. Happy Saturday to you. What a delight it is to be able to join you again on today. I'm just thankful that the Lord has given favor to me and as well as you. Listen, welcome to our Facebook Live family. And we certainly want to say welcome to those of you that are joining by way of YouTube. We're certainly thankful for you. If you're dialing in by phone, welcome to you as well. If today is your first day, we want to say welcome to you as well. We are certainly delightful today to be able to come before you and bring you some very practical ways to deal with some of life's issues. Absolutely right. We're here today. Listen, we're going to go hard in 60 minutes, and I promise you, we'll make sure that we haven't wasted your time. I want to say welcome to those of you who have been faithful and diligent and tuning in as well. I want to just get started today. We've got a very intense session for you today, and I want to manage your time as well. Welcome, welcome, and welcome again. It is Saturday morning. It's Black Friday weekend. It's Thanksgiving weekend 2022. Absolutely. Listen, if you've been hanging out with us, you've been with us almost an entire year on 2022, and we want to say thank you during this season of Thanksgiving. What a delight it is to have had your steadfastness, and we don't take that for granted. And we wanted to say thank you. Listen, somebody says, how can you join us? I want to give you a quick way to show you how you can join us. For example, you can join us on our Facebook Live. You see our handle there, Dr. K.O. Williams Space Ministry. And you can also go and join us by way of YouTube. Same handle, Dr. K.O. Williams Space Ministry. And when you go to YouTube, you can see really all the sessions that we have had. They're in order for you. And all you got to do is just click on one. If you missed a session, if you missed a Saturday, or if it was a life-changing Saturday and you just needed to hear it again, you can always go to our YouTube channel and you'll find those sessions chronologized there as well. And you can also dial in to us as well. Want to always notice in the bottom left-hand corner, your voice matters. Yes, because what we want to make sure you understand is that we hear and we're always open to figure out what new topics we can bring. All you got to do is go to that bottom left, type in bit.ly / real talk your voice. If you'll type in that, it'll take you straight to us, and you can type in any comments, any recommendations, or any new topics that you are grappling with. This is a Real Talk Life's Issues coaching series. It's live every Saturday for 60 minutes, talking about life's issues, straight, honest, transparent conversation. This is not for teenagers. This is for adults. We make that disclaimer up front so that you would be prepared for the content thereafter. And then we always bring practical tools to help you in this coaching series. And then we keep in mind anyone um, can join despite your beliefs or rigid religious affiliations. All right, so let's get started. Today, we're just happy to be with you on this Saturday. We've been talking about this series called Church Hurt. Yeah, that's right. We've heard you, and what I wanted to do today was to try to level set with you and to be able to help you in the process to be able to um, let's see how we can move forward just a little bit. I'm going to be multitasking um, because I've got two machines that I'm trying to work with today. And so here we have it. Let's start with, I've got a PowerPoint prepared for you. We're going to try to move through that with some time to give you for some questions. Listen, we started out talking about this concept called church hurt. Yep, that's it, and that's what we really wanted to focus in on today. If you are in the pews, and we want to invite you to give us some comments in the chat. If you'll say hello, good morning, amen. Just let us know that you're hanging out with us this morning, and we'll give you a shout out as we do that. And so I'm gonna try to look this morning. Good morning, my friend, brother David McCarter. It's always good to have you with us this morning as well. And so as we get started, I want to let you know that we're going to be dealing with the topic that if you've done any church work at all, you've experienced it or you've been there. And what we want to focus on is when church hurts. In other words, when you're doing something positive. Now, listen, this session is not for people who are going out there doing the wrong thing. This session is designed for people who are doing the right thing in the right place at the right time and experience some kind of offense. Oh my goodness. We're going to talk real good for you today because you're going to find out in just a second that you're not alone. All right. And so let's go to our next slide, please. All right. And so what we want to do is give you a practical guide for how to move past this church hurt. So we want to focus on a practical guide, how we can use this practical guide. It's what we want to anchor down on today. And this guide is going to help us not only overcome but move past. We talked about this term. This is just a review because I truly want you to have this in your arsenal. The vocabulary, which helps you to identify, because keep in mind, if you can't name it, you can't claim it. All right. And so the ecclesia exitus disease, it is this concept. It's a theological term, that is a religious term, which really talks about, it's a Latin term, ecclesia exitus disease. Yes, just like you have a heart disease, just like you have diabetic disease, we also have a spiritual term called ecclesia exitus disease, which simply means church dropout. Now, we've been dealing with this term for some time, and the pandemic has really amplified this term called ecclesia exitus disease. People were already on the fence around attending church, and yet now we have it on steroids, this term of church dropout. And so keep that in mind if you're a faith leader, if you're leading a group of people all across the country. People are dealing with this church dropout. And listen, the reasons are plethrous. That is simply to say that there are many, many, many reasons, but we're going to talk about at least one of those today, and that's called church dropout. And the reason for it is we're going to contend that it is because of church hurt, that people have experienced some infraction in church, and as a result, has caused them to say they're going to drop out of church. Next slide, please. So let's move a little bit faster because I got some things I want to cover today. And excuse me, maybe I'm talking directly to you. Perhaps you've experienced it. This ecclesia exitus disease, the decision, listen, to permanently withdraw from a congregation you had considered to be your church home. And that's what makes this so personal, is the fact that you've chosen to make this particular place of worship your church home. And then once you've made, there's a process you go through to make a place your church home. And once you make that decision, you feel good about it. You feel like you're a part of a community. And then once you get on the other side of the door, you begin to experience what we call ecclesia exodus disease. And some of the symptoms, uh, but we're certainly not limited to these, is you're in that arena when you encounter pain that you had not anticipated. um, this pain many times manifests itself in disappointment. Who am I speaking to on a Saturday morning that can say, you know what, dear good doctor, I got involved in a local congregation, thought I was on my way up until I hit this particular disappointment. And guess what? Um, Usually, when you talk about a pain or disappointment, there's a name that goes along with it. Um, and then how about this spiritual anatomy, which is simply the notion of a particular people where there's a breakdown. Listen to this, in the standards and values. Have you ever been there? You're with a group of people and the standards break down. The very fact that things that you know to be not true are being accepted as the norm. Oh my goodness. Um, and it even goes a little bit deeper. How about this? The lack of purpose. Have you ever been in a group of people in a congregation where it just seems to be a lack of purpose, that um, existentialism, that this notion that people do whatever's right in their own eyes. I might even try to do a one session on existentialism where um, people, even in the biblical times, the Bible declared that there was a time in Israel's history where everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Can you imagine a group of people? Well, there is no standard. There is no medium where everybody can level set from, and everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. You yourself know that that can be a problem. And so, next slide, please. This is perhaps some areas that you've experienced it in. If you think about it, though, and I know this is where I want to really try to dive down on just for a moment. The causes of this disease have been afflicting, listen, God's church a long time. Matter of fact, since the beginning of the church's history. We're going to talk about that just for a moment. Let's dig a little bit deeper. I hope you're taking notes this morning. Next slide, please. Ever since the beginning, Jesus was sent to save the Jews whose leaders rejected and conspired and to orchestrate his murder. Can you believe you're on an assignment to do good, not to do any harm? And in the process of you doing good, there are those plotting, conspiring, orchestrating. I'm talking good already to somebody. The fact that he was only sent here to seek and to save, and yet there was a group of people set aside to bring destruction to him. So we see that even Christ, from the beginning of his church's history, has been dealing with this notion around church hurt. Next slide, please. Now, broken by the church. Think about this. Somebody today, you're set out to do God's work. And here's Jesus, a great example. Jesus was accused of being demon possessed by the church, the same group of people who should have been set aside. Ecclesia is that name, which means that set aside group of people. It was not the people, as we say in the world, it was not the unbelievers, it was not those persons who did not have a good understanding around church laws and standards. It was the very people who should have known better. And it was those same people. who the Bible says, you can find this in Mark 3 and 22, that but the teachers of the religious law who had arrived from Jerusalem, listen what they said. They're talking about Jesus. He's possessed by Satan, the prince of demons, that were that where he gets the power to cast out demons. Can you imagine? Listen, these are religious people, and of all people, they say that he's possessed by a demonic influence. Not only that, Jesus is rejected in his own hometown. Am I talking good to anybody today? The reality is, when you start not only in your own town, maybe it's in your own family, maybe it's in your own community. Like you start out in your own community. The people that know you the best are the ones that turn around and give you the greatest hurt. Listen what Mark 6 and 3 says. Then they scoffed. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And his sisters live right here among us. They were deeply offended and refused to believe him. I want to talk to somebody today that if you're going to do ministry, if you're going to do God's work, listen, take the blinders off, because the only way you cannot encounter any church of hurt or church offense is for you to sit on the sideline. But if you're going to be effective, as Jesus sets the example, he was broken by the church, the very group of people that should have been his support system. I got one more for you. And then Jesus' closest friends hurt him. Yes, come on. Walk with me in the book of Mark, chapter 14. Listen, you know the story. Judas, Judas betrayed him. They gave him a name in the Bible called the kiss of death. That's where the term came from. That Judas, one of the 12, set aside. He was one of Jesus' inner circle people. And then Judas says that for 30 pieces of silver, he says, the man that I go up and I kiss, that will be the sign that he's the one that y'all looking for. It was from an inner team member. I'm talking good on a Saturday morning, because the reality is, oh, we get so bent out of shape. Oh, so many times I've heard so many people say, oh, I got hurt by people that were friends of mine in the church, and I decided I was just going to get out of the church. But let me tell you something. You're not alone, and you're not the first person who've had betrayal by friends. Listen, come up a little bit closer, and I can tell you that Peter denied him. Like, here's another inner circle member that says, listen, I walked with you, talked with you, ate with you. Listen, I know you inside and out. And then when all the chips are down, am I talking good to anybody today? When you needed them the most, I know I'm ready to get happy already on a Saturday morning, because somebody put somebody's name right beside that statement. You were at your wits' end. Jesus was down in the final stages of the crucifixion, the inner courts, the Bible says, and he's down there, and they push him down on the ground. And while down on the ground, Peter is down there also. The Bible says they made eye contact with each other. Lord have mercy. It's not Easter time. I'm not going to put my weight on that. But let me tell you something. It's hard to look Jesus straight in the eye and still remain the same. The Bible says that Peter denied him 3 times. And when that cock rooster crowed, he remembered what Jesus told him, that the crop before that cock crows 3 times, you're going to deny me. Peter tried to deny it, but listen, in the end, he was trying to demonstrate that sometimes even your closest allies, they can't drink from the bitter cup. Yes, there it is right there. I want to talk to somebody that you got some friends. Don't write them off, because most of the times that it's just not in their human nature. unless they're really sold out to Christ. And so, what's the big takeaway today? The takeaway is simple: is that you're not the first person to have had encountered these disappointments, these pains, these betrayals, these hurts, these setbacks. Can you imagine? Jesus experienced this, but he kept going to the cross. It is a powerful statement to someone that even in the midst of your disappointments, you have to muster up enough spiritual strength to keep going. I'm talking good to somebody today. Next slide. Because the reality is, even though you have these church hurts, um, I want to tell you something. You got to figure out how to keep going. I want you to take this slide as a definition. I've tried my best to put this into a definition. And maybe this will help somebody today to discover what that feeling is you've been trying to struggle with. So, church hurt is defined as an emotional or a physical pain. You see, it could be either or both. Church hurt is defined as something emotional or physical, a pain felt by someone inflicted by words or your actions or your inactions. In other words, you looked at something, you knew it was not the right thing, and you turned your head and said nothing. Am I talking good to anybody? So church hurt can be from someone who has felt pain by someone inflicted by words. We know words, we know actions, or the inactions of a person of leadership in a church or any person who represents the church. So we have two camps that we want to level down on today. Number one, we typically think about church hurt when we talk about a spiritual leader, maybe a pastor or maybe a deacon in the church or someone or maybe one of the elders in the church that these are people in leadership, and I get it. To whom much is given, much is required. So yes, we do typically tend to have a higher expectation for someone in leadership. That's one school. But my friend, I want to talk to you also about a person who represents the church. For example, you can't say that just because I'm a member, there's no accountability to me. Because guess what? The moment you identify with the local church, you are therefore representing the church. Yes. And so when you're out in the community or when you're with your family or when you're at work, I'm talking good to somebody today that you can inflict church hurt outside of the building. Oh, yes, I said it, and I'll say it again. You don't get a pass just because you say, "Oh, I'm not in church and my actions don't reflect the church." Oh, yes, my friend. They reflect the church just the same. And so I want you to understand today that this term is a broad term. It's a very broad term. And what I want us to encounter today is the notion that if we're going to do ministry, it's in the church, but it's also out of the church. Two camps. Next slide, please. All right, the effects of church hurt. I wanted to talk about this for a second today to let you know that there is 37% of, or that's four. Think about it. You got 10 people lined up, and four out of the 10 unchurched people avoid church because of a bad experience. That's exactly right. It's another way of saying sometimes people avoid worship because something they've experienced in their past, in the context of church, it caused them to say one thing: I want no parts of the church. I want to stop, put a quarter in the meter, and talk to someone today and tell you, don't give up on church. Church, we're going to show you in just a second, is made up of a whole lot of folks who are still a work in progress. As a matter of fact, if we do some real examination, we'll find that the church is really just a hospital of people in need of healing. But I want to talk to someone today that says, you know what, uh, Dr. Williams, I know what you're saying is good and all, but you don't know the level to which I was hurt. I had a bad experience, and that experience was so bad until I decided I want no parts of the church. Now, let's go a little bit further. Next slide. I want to give you some examples. I've been trying to search around to get some examples around some people. For example, there's a single mom whose church promises to stand by her, but disappears after she got a divorce. Let me tell you, there's somebody even here today that I'm speaking with. You can identify with this single mom. The fact that the church made you some promises while you were going through your domestic situations, and the situations got such that you ended up um, after a while in a divorce. And the reality is that there is life after divorce. But the reality of that statement is the church made her a promise. And now she feels like she has been abandoned by the very people who were supposed to provide her inner support. There's a man that opens up about his struggles with same sex attractions, thinking the church was a safe space. Listen, the church was a safe space, it was a safe place with safe people, only to be shunned thereafter. Have you been there? Maybe not same sex, maybe it's some other spiritual infraction that you're dealing with, and you came to the place, and you shared it with people that you thought were confidential, only to find out that you heard it again. I know another example of a person who was having marital problems, and they go to the church, they go to the leader of the church, they schedule a meeting, the meeting of them and their estranged wife. The leader walks them through a session, and before they could get home, they got a call from one of the other members of the church, literally articulating everything that they had shared in the confidential counseling session. Can you imagine the level of betrayal that that couple experienced? But the reality is that there is life after church hurt. There's a young girl who feels bullied by her church because of her mom's sexual orientation. And so here you have the young child who is being bullied by the very people that should have created a safe space for her to talk about it. I came today to tell you, if any of these examples resonate with you, listen, you're in that arena of church hurt. Or maybe even there's a faithful tither of the church who sees a pastor or a faith leader in a Walmart, and the pastor doesn't even acknowledge who you are. Listen, I came by to tell you that I could give you thousands of examples of church hurt. Next slide. But the reality is, after you encounter the church hurt, there's a shift that I want to try to help you with on today. The church, as I told you, the Greek term is called ecclesia or ecclesia. It is the meeting house. But can I tell you that the term church is referenced 109 times in just the New Testament alone? The church is a called out group of people set apart for the service of God. And I want to tell you, it's very challenging because many times we have problems, and then we come to the church seeking help for a helpless situation. It's a very complex concept because when you get to church, you then encounter people who are in the process of developing their own personal spiritual formation. But somehow or another, we think that when we get to church, we should find perfect people. And therein is the irony towards going to church. Next slide, please. So we know that the church is a called out group of people. So what I have found is that when people really get hurt, I ain't talking about this little surface hurt. I'm talking about the kind of hurt where they says, I'm all churched out. I don't want no more parts of the church. Typically what I find is that the church, um, people try to separate God from the church. Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty. Because can I tell you, my friend, that the church belongs to God? Yes, when you read the Bible, it is clear that Jesus is head of the church. Ephesians chapter 5. I want to give you something to go back and reference. It talks about the spiritual order of the church. God is head of Christ, and Christ is head of the church. Let me tell you, my friend, that you cannot separate Christ from the church. The two are married to each other. So we have to figure out how to give you some tools that you can manage the church hurt. Some say, no, I love God, but I don't want to have nothing to do with the church. No, not only is Jesus the head of the church, that's in chapter Ephesians 5. Jesus gave his life for the church. When you look at Ephesians 5, it talks about Jesus laid down his life for the church. My friend, you my job is to give you some tools to help you to manage the church hurt. To the person that says, Williams, I'm all churched out, I want to talk to you today to tell you that there are some tools that we can help you with that can help you manage the church hurt and not separate yourself from the very entity that Christ is coming back for, which is the church. Look at this. Jesus loves the church and returning for the church. Yes, that's why, my friend, you don't want to separate yourself from the church. For we know that the church is the bride of Christ. And we also know that if you read Ephesians 5, for it says that he will return for a church without spot or wrinkle or any such blemish. I want to tell you that it's imperative. That is, it's critical for you to stick with the church and try to manage your church hurt. Listen, next slide, please. So the relevant question of today, I've been talking for the last 20 something minutes, but I really wanted to ask you this from the very beginning. Who hurt you? It's a name behind your church hurt. And I came today to tell somebody that at some point you have to stop, stand still, and you have to acknowledge that there's a name behind your church hurt. Maybe it's a church name. Maybe it's a pastor's name. Maybe it's a minister's name, or maybe it's a congregant's name, somebody in the church that they don't hold a role, but what they did caused you to say, I don't want any more parts of the church. And what I wanted to say today is one of the first steps in managing your church hurt is that you have to name it. And until you name it, you cannot tame it. So if you want to move past that pain that's got you sitting on the sideline of church, you first got to say the name. And can I tell you that's what Black Lives Matters has taught America, is that when these situations come, they say his name or say her name, because what you're doing is amplifying the fact that the person matters. Yes. And the flip side of that is in therapy, you're actually bringing healing when you name it. Listen, I want to tell somebody today, You ought to get a piece of paper out and you need to write it out because it's therapeutic. Every time you put a name to it, now you can take that name. You ready for this? Place it on the altar. But until you get a name for it, Lord have mercy, how can you put it on the altar and ask God to heal it? You have to first name it. I want to talk to somebody today. It's a name, it's a person, it's an entity. And until you quit running from it, you're going to continue to get tripped up, go so far, step back, go so far. No, at some point, you put a name to it. Oh, when I wrote this model, I have a name for mine. I sure did. But can I tell you something? I put it on the altar and God healed me of it. Yes, He did. And that's why I'm able to talk you through it because your first step, we're going to give you some more steps, but the most critical step is if somebody has hurt you, you have to put a name to it. Some people don't even want to think about it. Say, oh, the pain is too great, Williams. You don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, yes, I know clearly what you're talking about. But what I am saying to you is the first step in your practical guide for overcoming church hurt and moving beyond it is to name it. You must put a name beside that church hurt. Next slide, please. All right. So you say, what do I do? Number one, I want to give you some tools. We've talked about it. Now let's give you some tools. Some first aid spiritual trauma. First aid to spiritual trauma. The first thing is you have to right size your expectations. We typically put unrealistic expectations on others that they themselves cannot meet. Listen to this quote by Steve Mansfield. As humans, we are capable of the greatest good and the most disgusting sin. So, what Steve Mansfield argues is that as humans, we are fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image. But, but as the late Apostle L.O. Sanders says, that God um, is not. He has not created us to be machines. Um, he said, but God is a perfect gentleman. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. It is a wonderful image that inside of a human is the potential to do some of the greatest good. But inside that same individual is the potential to do some of the most damaging hurt to any individual. And so Paul talked about this in Ephesians. Listen to what he says. He says that there are times when I would do good and evil shows up. Oh, my friend, what I'm trying to tell you is that we have these expectations around people that many times the people cannot fulfill. Why? Because every individual has two positions within the same individual. They can, as Steve Mansfield says, they can out of nowhere come up with the most outstanding good gestures that can blow your mind. I saw a man one time go into a Cracker Barrel, and a young lady was in there just minding her business. And you know how you have a waiter that talks with um, the customers. She began to reveal to this man that she was a single mom and she had just had a tragedy and death with her family. Her mom passed away and she was just having a hard time. And to her surprise, the man left on the bottom of a napkin 10 $100 bills, $1,000 in the same day. The lady, um, he didn't even stay for her to realize what he had done. What I'm telling you is, as humans, there lies within us the power to do some amazing things. And then I know people in the church who are evil, and they're there for the wrong reason. They're hurt, and they're trying to stay and inflict their hurt on other people. Let me give you a quick example. You may have heard about this in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Within the last month, there was a nurse, a person who had given their lives to help and healing people right at Wake Forest Baptist Hospital. And the nurse was finally caught for killing two innocent people, giving them overdoses in um, the needle or the IV. And guess what? He was on his way to killing the third person before he was caught. My friends, in the same human being is the potential to do such evil to innocent people. Oh yes, it's number one, you have to name it. I want to help you today. And then number two, you have to ask God to help you to resize your expectations. People are human, and they make some great decisions sometimes, and sometimes some very stupid decisions. I've been there myself. I ain't gonna sit here and act like I walked a chalk line and had a halo over my head. Oh, don't look at me funny. For the good book says that we have all sinned and come short of God's glory. So I want you today to know that while you're dealing with church hurt, ask God to help you to recalibrate. That is to refocus your expectations on people. Because I need to give it to you straight. Whether you're a preacher or a usher at the back door, Paul says within all of us is this battle, this constant battle. When I would do good, evil is there. And when I would do evil, Paul says, good shows up. And so in all of us is this constant battle. Now, I know it's not an excuse, but it's certainly an explanation to try to explain why someone who sometimes you wrote off as bad, and they can do some amazing things. And then sometimes the people that you have the most expectations for can do some of the most damaging things. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk today in my final time with you today around spiritual trauma. Spiritual trauma is this 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 place where we know that trauma happens, and it's the effect of things that happen and cause um, some level of infraction, that something is damaged as a result of an incident. We know, for example, when you're in a vehicle accident, and when you're in that accident, because of the severity of the impact, I'm talking good to somebody, that the person experiences this trauma, the impact of the damage is so great until it requires what we call some triage. And that's what we want to talk about today. This triage, and when you go to the hospital, they immediately try to start um, triaging, meaning giving intense detail to a scenario. But today you've not been in a vehicle accident, but maybe a church accident. And that accident has caused so much impact until somehow you feel like you're not able to recover. But let's talk about a little spiritual trauma. Next slide. All right. I want to tell you that when you have spiritual trauma, one of the first things that is impacted is your emotions. Yes, um, your emotions. Let's talk about it for a moment. Um, if you've gone through a traumatic experience, you may feel like you were knocked off your feet emotionally and spiritually. I want to tell you that this is really normal. The writer of Psalms 42 tells God it feels like chaos roars at me like a flood. That's Psalms 42 and 7. Sometimes people try to sing like they're strong on the outside and hide the chaos they are feeling on the inside. I want to tell you today that if you've been dealing with some level of hurt, you have to ask God to help you to accept what has happened, and it will help you in the healing process. So think about it. Once you name it, you have to accept that it happened. Yes, um, I want to tell you that there are so many people that when you don't accept it, my friend, hear me good today, it slows down the healing process because some people are still at the point of impact. Like, I can't believe that preacher did that to me. Well, guess what? They did, and it happened. And you have to eventually get off that train and get on the healing train. Now, when you get on the healing train, you know you're on the right train because you have at least named who the infractor was and you've at least acknowledged that it did happen. Now, it's healthy to be honest about how you're feeling, about yourself, about others, and about God. Can I tell you sometimes, as a faith leader, I've gone to people grieving and in the middle of their grief. I know my time's about out, but I wanted to put my weight down good on number one. You got to learn to accept what has happened. There is this serenity prayer. We all know about it. God, help me to accept the things I can, help me to change the things I can, and help me to accept the things I can't. But here's the big caveat in that serenity prayer is, but God, give me wisdom to know the difference. And I'm telling you right now, you first got to accept sometimes that this spiritual trauma, people have actually been angry with God. Yes, you got to learn to at least name it before you can tame it. Number one, when things go wrong, you may look for someone to blame, yourself or someone else. This is a way of making sense of what has happened, but it isn't helpful. Accepting what happened will help you to heal. Don't play the blame game because it only slows down the healing process. I got to move a little bit faster. And then, secondly, um, if others are affected by the traumatic event, you may feel guilty that you suffered less than they did. This is a common response. You're in a church setting, and in the end analysis, when the impact finishes, you weren't the only one in the scenario, but it seems like you got the worst end of the deal. Like, why didn't the other ones experience the same thing? And I came by to tell you that you have to ask God to help you to manage your emotions because they'll be all over the place. And before I leave this slide, I always say, help God. God, help me to manage my emotions so my emotions don't manage me. Next slide, please. All right. What you need to understand is that God cares for you. What happened was not your decision. God has a purpose for the remainder of your days. And I need you to hear me good that if you're dealing with a church hurt, it doesn't matter how much the spiritual trauma was. They have you in an emergency room, down in the operating room, in the trauma center, because the impact was so great. What I need you to understand is that God cares for you. Absolutely. And the reality is that the trauma is actually working for your good. Come here, Romans. Paul tells us in Romans 8 and 28, and we know that's the confidence that we have that all things work together for the good of them who love God, who are the called according to his purpose. There it is for you right there, my friend. And that if you could look down the pages of your life and you could see where the spiritual trauma was actually working for your good. I want to give you one of my great sermons I love to preach, and that's in Genesis 50, 19 and 20. Joseph is that great example. Oh, there's so many in the Bible I could give you, but the one I love is this: Joseph's brothers do everything they can to try to destroy this young man, and the whole time, all he wanted was God's purpose for his life. And in the end, instead of getting vengeance, Joseph has the opportunity to give revenge to his brothers. In verse 19 and 20, he says, and you meant it for evil, but God worked it for my good. He says, I am in the place of God. I got to close my session today, but I got to tell you this before I go, that what others meant for evil, God has the power to take it and turn it for your good. I want you to know that today, that it's working for your good. They meant it for evil, but God has so much power, he can work it for your good. I got so many testimonies of my own. I'd be shouting if I had to tell you about all of them, but just let me tell you that God has the power to work it for your good. Next slide, please. I'm going to try to go number three, and you may feel ashamed, but I want to tell you today to get your head up again. When you're reacting to trauma, if you need to accept help from others, it's okay. What I want to tell you is some people can rebound quicker than others. But if you find yourself stuck in the trauma, what you have to ask God to do is to give you a support system. Yes, seek out support systems, groups of people or persons or individuals um, who 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 can identify first of all with what you're going through, and then they can assist you in walking hand in hand in that recovery process. It's just another way of saying that no man is an island to himself, and it is okay to seek help from others if you come to the conclusion that the spiritual trauma is more than you can process. Next slide, please. And so I want to talk to somebody today. You will never heal if you let your hurt become your identity. Maddie Montgomery. What this is saying is that some people, your hurt has become who you are. You say, how do you know that, Williams? Because every time people talk with you, it's the only thing you want to talk about. Those people hurt me down there. That person did such damage to me. My friend, at some point, you have to make sure that the infraction doesn't define who you are. I'm more than my church hurt. Did you hear what I said? You ought to take today as a spiritual affirmation and say to yourself, I am more than my church hurt. My church hurt doesn't define who I am. Listen, you got divorced, so what? The divorce doesn't define who you are. Listen, you got laid off the job, so what? You got laid off the job, but that job didn't define who you are. I know some people that the only thing they know is their church position. And if you took that church position from them, that person would just absolutely go bonkers because they have allowed their position to define them. I'm talking good to somebody today. And I want to tell you, don't let your church hurt define who you are. Listen, figure out how to flip it and now make your church hurt a stepping stone in your spiritual journey. I gotta go. I got one more slide I believe I can get in for you today. Just remember, don't let your church hurt define who you are. Next slide for me, please. This gentleman, I want to give you this quote. Church hurt in my closing today. He says, if being hurt by the church causes you to lose faith in God, then your faith was in people, not in God. Because you have to ask God to help you not to allow the church hurt to define who you are. I'm here today to tell you that there is life after church hurt. Next slide, please. But you have to make up in your mind that I've had some spiritual trauma and I'm working on my spiritual first aid kit. That's all I have for you today. I want to thank you once again for joining us today. Stay tuned on next week. We're going to give you some more practical guides on this concept of spiritual trauma. And so as we look today at this whole concept, I'm just so happy today to talk about some of you. Let me do this real quickly. I want to give some quick shout outs. I got about 30 seconds left. Sister Satchel, good morning to you. Thank you for checking in all the way in the Durham area. Sister Ethel, God bless you all the way in the Virginia area. Oh, Mr. Flanagan, thank you so much down in the Jacksonville area. To my wonderful, beautiful friend, Miss Sister Deborah Simpson, thank you again for joining, always in the Greensboro area. I'm just so happy for all of you who are talking and checking in with me today. Again, share this with a friend. On next week, we're going to go deep into spiritual trauma. You do not want to miss it because we're going to show you some ways that it manifests itself. We're going to show you some ways. Not only does it manifest itself in the type of people that it manifests itself in, but oh, bless the name of God, we cannot leave without showing you ways to flip the spiritual trauma and use it in your spiritual first aid kit as a tool towards your spiritual formation. That's what we have. Can I pray with you today? God, we thank you for time well spent in this space on today. We are just too thankful that you're teaching us how to take our situations and work them and put them in your hands of the master who has the ability to, as you did with Joseph, to turn them for our good. As we leave this space today, somebody, Lord, is on the fence. They're still grappling. They're listening. They're trying to take the application and make it real. But today, Father, I ask that you would give them space to realize that they are more than their spiritual church hurt. As we leave here today, until next time, I ask you, Father, to give them the strength that only you can have. Give them the peace of mind that only you can provide. It is my prayer in Jesus' name. Listen, the Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. May God make his face to shine upon you. May God be gracious unto you. And may he give you peace until we meet again. That's it. Until next time. God bless you.